Welcome to Value Vest Daily. While all the headlines are screaming about the latest spikes in oil prices, a new report we've been digging into suggests there's a much bigger story playing out just under the surface. It's pointing to a potential wealth transfer that, frankly, some of the smartest people in the room are watching very closely. So in this explainer, we're going to break down that report. It draws a direct line from the geopolitical crises we're seeing right now to a potential 10 or even 100-fold boom in two absolutely critical sectors, uranium and rare earth elements. We're going to explore how global conflict could be fundamentally redrawing the world's energy map for good. And, just as a quick reminder, this analysis is for educational purposes only and should not be considered financial or tax advice.
So let's just start with the big question this report really forces us to ask. How can one single regional conflict set off a domino effect that completely reshapes the entire global energy market? The analysis we're looking at today argues this isn't some what-if scenario. It's a reality playing out right now. It's a powerful chain reaction that starts with a military strike and could very well end with a complete revaluation of the assets that power our world. And that, of course, could unlock massive new opportunities for anyone who understands this new energy landscape.
All right, let's dive right in. The first piece of this puzzle, according to the report, is what it calls the geopolitical shockwave. Now, this isn't just some background noise on the news. This is the main event. It's the spark that lights the fuse on literally everything that follows. It's a classic and pretty brutal example of how instability in one corner of the globe can trigger immediate and far-reaching economic pain for everyone else. Okay, so according to the source material, the catalyst event kicked off in early 2026. In February, the conflict in Iran, which had been simmering for a long time, suddenly escalated dramatically, with military strikes targeting its nuclear sites. By March, that tension boiled over into direct threats against the Strait of Hormuz. Now, to really get the gravity of this, you have to understand what the Strait of Hormuz is. It's not just some patch of water, it's the world's most critical energy choke point. It is the jugular vein of the global oil market. It's this tiny, narrow artery that a massive chunk of the planet's energy flows through every single day.
And this slide right here, this quantifies that immediate, terrifying impact. The report states that credible threats to the strait put roughly 20% of the entire world's daily oil and gas supply at risk. Just let that sink in for a second. We're not talking about a 2% disruption. We're talking about 1/5 of the global energy supply effectively held hostage overnight. The source calls it the biggest energy security shock in decades. And what does that look like in the real world? Well, it means shipping insurance rates just go vertical. It means frantic phone calls between world leaders. It means absolute panic in the markets and a desperate scramble for any available barrel of oil that doesn't have to pass through that one single vulnerable choke point.
The economic fallout was immediate, and it was brutal. The price of crude oil, the very lifeblood of our global economy, surged past $100 a barrel, and it showed no signs of slowing down. A price spike like that sends shockwaves through every part of our lives. It's not just about the pain you feel at the gas pump. It means higher costs for manufacturing, for shipping, for farming, for the food on our tables. This creates this immense, almost unbearable pressure on governments and corporations to find a real, long-term solution and to find it fast.
You see, a shock of this magnitude doesn't just fade away. It forces a fundamental rethink. It changes the way entire nations operate. And that brings us to the second phase of the report's thesis, the global search for real, genuine energy security. When your entire economy can be held hostage by a conflict happening thousands of miles away, the message from your people becomes crystal clear. Find other energy sources that are reliable, that are domestic, and most importantly, that are immune to these kinds of geopolitical games. The whole conversation shifts from what's cheapest to what ensures survival.
The report frames this choice as a pretty stark one. On one side, you've got fossil fuels, which this crisis just proved are incredibly volatile and totally subject to the whims of foreign powers. But on the other side, the report points to nuclear power, highlighting its rock-solid reliability and its domestic control. A country's fleet of nuclear plants isn't dependent on a shipping lane in the Middle East. You can store years' worth of fuel right on site. But here's the crucial part. They provide 24/7 baseload power. That's the constant, non-negotiable electricity the grid has to have to function. The power that keeps the hospitals running, the data centers online, and our cities lit up even when the sun isn't shining or the wind isn't blowing. It's the absolute bedrock of a modern economy.
And the report argues this isn't just some theory. It's a trend that was already happening, and now it's being massively accelerated by some powerful new catalysts. First, we're seeing what some are calling a nuclear renaissance, with reactors that were slated for shutdown being brought back to life across the US, Europe, and Asia. Second, and this is a huge new factor, is the simply insatiable appetite for power from the AI revolution.
I mean, the next generation of AI data centers consume electricity on the scale of small cities, and they need that power 24/7, which makes nuclear a perfect fit. And finally, governments are now actively writing policy to force this shift, not for environmental reasons, but for raw, unapologetic national security.
So this urgent global pivot back towards nuclear power has a direct and totally unavoidable consequence. If you're going to build new reactors and restart old ones, you absolutely must have more nuclear fuel. And that brings us to the next crucial part of the report's analysis, the massive, unfolding demand surge for uranium.
This chart from the source material tells the entire story in one powerful image. On one side, you have global demand for uranium, which was already high and is now projected to just grow exponentially because of all the things we just talked about. But on the other side, you have the actual supply coming out of the ground, which is dangerously tight. You see, you can't just flip a switch and get more uranium. In the West, it can take a decade or more just to get the permits to build a new mine, before you even put a shovel in the ground. Then it's another several years to build it. This inflexibility on the supply side creates what economists call a structural deficit, where demand is just fundamentally, and for the foreseeable future, going to outstrip supply.
And this direct quote from the report really adds a sense of real-world urgency to that chart. Utilities are panic buying contracts, and we're already seeing producers sell at 101+ premiums. What this means is that the power companies, the actual end users of this stuff, are so worried about future shortages that they are desperately trying to lock in long-term deals. They are willing to pay a massive premium over today's price just to guarantee they have the fuel they need to keep their multi-billion-dollar reactors running down the road. It's a total scramble for security.
And the numbers in the report absolutely back this up. As of April 2026, the spot price for uranium is sitting around $84 to $85 a pound. And yeah, that's down a little from its peak earlier in the year, but it's still up over 30% year over year. A move that big in a major commodity is like a flashing red light on the dashboard. It's a clear signal of the intense supply and demand pressure building in this market.
But the report's analysis doesn't stop with uranium. It actually identifies a parallel boom happening in another critical and often misunderstood sector: rare earth elements. The exact same logic, securing domestic, geopolitically safe supply chains, is driving an incredible surge here as well. Why? Because the modern world, and especially the modern military, simply cannot function without them.
So what exactly are rare earth elements, or REEs? Well, despite the name, they aren't actually that rare in the Earth's crust, but they are incredibly difficult to mine and process. They're a group of metals with these unique magnetic and electronic properties that make them absolutely essential for high-tech stuff. We're talking about the ultra-powerful, lightweight magnets that drive the motors in every electric vehicle and spin the turbines in every wind farm. The report specifically calls out two heavy rare earths, terbium and dysprosium. And why these two? Well, think of them like a secret sauce. When you add a little bit to magnets, they can operate at extremely high temperatures without losing their power, a trait that is vital for things like fighter jets and missile guidance systems.
Now, the big challenge with rare earths, as the source lays out so clearly, is the supply chain. Step 1. For decades, China has strategically cornered the market on the complex, messy chemical process of separating and refining these elements, especially the heavy ones we just mentioned. Step 2. As geopolitical tensions have gotten worse, China has shown it is more than happy to use this dominance as a weapon, slapping on export controls and threatening to cut off supply. This creates a massive, totally unacceptable vulnerability for Western nations. So step 3 is the inevitable reaction. Western governments are now pouring billions of dollars into policies to build their own domestic supply chains, from the mine all the way to the magnet.
And all of this, the geopolitical shock, the pivot to nuclear, the uranium deficit, and the mad dash for rare earths, brings us to the final section of our breakdown, the report's specific investment thesis. After laying out all these enormous macro trends, the source connects them directly to a few specific companies it says are positioned to benefit. We're just going to present this information neutrally, exactly as it's laid out in the report.
The report highlights 3 companies. First up is Energy Fuels, ticker UUU, which it calls a dual play because it's involved in both sectors. It's a US-based uranium producer that has also cleverly used its facilities to become the first domestic producer of those separated heavy rare earths. Second is Uranium Energy Corp, ticker UEC, described as a pure-play US producer. That means it's focused only on uranium, with what the report calls low-cost assets and a proven ability to sell its product at premium prices. And finally, it mentions Cameco, ticker CCJ.
This is a major global producer from Canada, and it's framed as a larger, more stable blue-chip anchor in the sector, with solid, long-term contracts.
So, how in the world does the report get to its headline-grabbing claim of 10 to 100x potential? Well, it's based on what it sees as a convergence of three powerful forces. First, something called early cycle leverage. This is the idea where just a small increase in the price of a commodity can lead to a massive, outsized increase in the profits and the stock price of a miner. Second is the direct financial impact of new high-priced supply contracts hitting the books, which can lock in years of future profitability. And finally, you have these powerful government policy tailwinds that are essentially underwriting and de-risking the growth of these domestic industries. Again, this is the logic presented within the source material we analyzed.
And that brings us to the ultimate question that this entire analysis really builds towards. Are we witnessing a true, fundamental, and permanent shift in our global energy system, all driven by the hard realities of geopolitics? Or is this just a short-term, knee-jerk reaction to a crisis that's going to fade away when tensions eventually cool down? The report we've broken down today makes a powerful case for the first one, but it's a question worth thinking about critically. Please subscribe, like, and share ValueVest Daily for daily learning opportunities before you put your money to work. And one more thing, please put in a comment if you want us to deep dive into any specific high-risk/reward opportunities. We'll see you in the next one.